They dumped crushed eggshells on the beach, hoping to stop coastal erosion. Years later, something truly unbelievable happened. What started as a promising solution led to unexpected results. What happened next left onlookers stunned. On the horizon, the ships slowly approached the beach, their massive hulls cutting through the deep blue waters like silent sentinels. The ships carried tons of crushed eggshells to help fight the erosion that threatened the coast. As the ships docked, giant cranes swung into action, dumping the crushed eggshells onto the shoreline in white dust. The crushed shells spread across the sand, covering it like a thick, pale blanket as workers hurried to even out the layers that were supposed to restore and stabilize the fragile beach. Weeks before the shipment of crushed eggshells arrived, the news of this groundbreaking plan spread quickly, creating anticipation and hope among environmentalists, local communities, and scientists alike. Coastlines had been fighting a losing battle against relentless waves and strong winds, leading to severe coastal erosion for years. Year after year, entire sections of sandy beaches disappeared into the ocean, leaving behind barren rocky shores where vibrant ecosystems once thrived. The damage wasn't just environmental. Entire coastal towns suffered from flooding and the collapse of tourism. The need for a sustainable solution was more urgent than ever. Traditional methods of combating coastal erosion had fallen short. Sand dredging, seawalls, and artificial barriers only provided temporary fixes, often causing more harm than good in the long run. Nothing seemed to effectively restore the natural balance of the beaches. That's when scientists presented a new approach. Simple, cost-effective, and surprisingly resourceful. Instead of relying on expensive, large-scale engineering projects, they proposed using crushed eggshells, a common agricultural waste, to stabilize the beaches. The concept was revolutionary, yet straightforward. Transform what was typically discarded into a solution for a pressing environmental issue. The idea stemmed from eggshells comprising nearly 95% calcium carbonate, a natural compound already present in the Earth's crust. Calcium carbonate is widely known for its role in soil health and its ability to combat degradation. The scientists theorized that when crushed into a fine sand-like powder, eggshells could be spread over the shoreline, blending with the existing sand. The calcium carbonate would help bind the sand particles, making the beach more resistant to wind and wave erosion. Additionally, the increased calcium levels could enhance the soil's fertility, promoting the growth of beach grasses and other vegetation that naturally stabilize dunes. Support for the project grew quickly. Local governments and environmental agencies saw it as an opportunity to address the escalating issue of beach erosion without the environmental risks associated with traditional methods. Agricultural producers were also eager to get involved, viewing it as a sustainable way to dispose of millions of tons of eggshell waste produced every year. What had once been a waste product, filling landfills and creating disposal issues, was now seen as a valuable resource that could help restore coastlines and protect fragile ecosystems. With the promise of success backed by solid scientific research, the project received swift approval. Government officials allocated funding, and logistics teams coordinated the transport of the eggshells from processing plants to the coastlines in need of restoration. Ships were chartered to carry the massive loads of crushed eggshells, each holding thousands of tons of fine ground material. It was an unprecedented effort, a coordinated response involving scientists, environmentalists, and industry experts working together toward a common goal. The plan was ambitious, but confidence was high. The early tests showed promising results, and the potential benefits were clear. Not only could the crushed eggshells help reduce erosion and stabilize the beaches, but they also offered a way to recycle waste that would otherwise end up in landfills. It seemed like a win-win scenario. However, some local environmental groups and marine experts hesitated when the eggshell project was first announced. They raised significant concerns about the potential long-term impacts of introducing such a vast amount of foreign material to the coastline. To them, the plan to use crushed eggshells to combat erosion seemed untested on this scale. Adding a calcium-rich substance could alter the sand's natural composition and disrupt the coastal ecosystem's delicate balance. While proponents argued that calcium carbonate was a naturally occurring compound, critics worried that altering the makeup of the beach sediment could have unforeseen effects on marine habitats, local flora, and the way tides interacted with the shore. Despite the reservations, the urgency of the situation and the project's bold promise to restore the rapidly eroding coastlines helped sway public opinion. The proposal was viewed as a necessary gamble, an experimental but potentially groundbreaking approach to saving the coastline from further deterioration. The project moved forward with cautious optimism, backed by the belief that immediate action was better than watching the beach disappear entirely. Behind the scenes, the logistics of this massive undertaking had been months in the making. Egg processing plants across 3 states had been coordinating their efforts, stockpiling mountains of discarded shells in massive warehouses. Inside these facilities, the air was thick with white powder as industrial grinders worked around the clock, pulverizing millions of eggshells into a fine, sand-like consistency. The collection process itself had become a community effort. Local restaurants, bakeries, and food manufacturers had set up special bins for eggshell collection. Schools started environmental programs teaching students about recycling while gathering shells from cafeterias. Even households got involved, with neighborhood collection points appearing in community centers and supermarket parking lots. Workers in white protective suits monitored sophisticated grinding machines at the processing facilities that could reduce thousands of shells to powder in minutes. Quality control teams regularly tested samples to ensure the correct particle size. Too fine, and it would blow away in the wind. Too coarse, and it wouldn't integrate properly with the beach sand. Transportation proved equally challenging. While the plan to restore the beach with eggshells was straightforward in theory, the practicalities of moving millions of tons of delicate material proved more complex than expected. The first issue was the eggshell's fragility. Once crushed into a fine powder, the material became highly susceptible to moisture. Even a small amount of dampness could cause clumping, rendering the eggshells unusable for the project. To solve this, special moisture-proof containers were designed specifically for the task. These containers featured airtight seals and a multi-layered lining that protected the powder during transport, ensuring it remained dry and easy to spread once it reached the beach. Loading the crushed eggshells onto ships was another challenge altogether. The eggshells were processed and packed at inland facilities far from the coast. From there, they were transported by a fleet of trucks to port storage areas. However, traditional loading methods and equipment couldn't be used because the eggshell powder needed careful handling to prevent contamination and moisture exposure. Specialized conveyor belts with enclosed systems were set up at the docks to transfer the powder directly from the storage containers into the ship's hulls without exposure to the open air. The location of the project site further complicated matters. The eggshells had to be dumped directly onto sections of the beach that were most affected by erosion, often inaccessible by road. Large trailers and trucks couldn't reach the targeted dumping zones due to the soft, unstable sand and narrow coastal paths. Instead, the crushed eggshells were loaded onto smaller, shallow draft ships capable of navigating closer to the shoreline. These ships, equipped with unique unloading mechanisms, would then drop anchor offshore, using long, adjustable pipes to deposit the material directly onto the beach. The pipes ensured that the eggshell powder was spread evenly along the shoreline, mimicking the natural distribution of sand by waves. Despite the logistical difficulties, the operation moved forward smoothly. Teams of engineers, dock workers, and environmental specialists coordinated to ensure the material reached the intended locations without losing its integrity. By overcoming these transportation challenges, they delivered millions of tons of crushed eggshells to the coastlines in desperate need of reinforcement, setting the stage for what was hoped to be a groundbreaking success in the battle against coastal erosion. With the crushed eggshells finally in place, anticipation filled the air. Scientists, local officials, and beachgoers held their breath, eager to see if this unconventional solution would live up to its promise. People were hopeful as the white fragments were dumped into the sea. The question on everyone's mind now was whether this innovative approach could bring about the lasting change they had been searching for, or if unforeseen challenges lay just beneath the surface. At first, the results were immediate and promising. As the eggshells settled, they immediately affected the beach's physical structure. The sand, once loose and prone to shifting, became firmer underfoot. The previously unstable sections of the beach, which had eroded to the point of becoming dangerous to walk on, now appeared resilient, able to withstand the relentless push and pull of the tides. Once jagged and uneven, the shoreline began to take on a more uniform shape, its contours softened by the newly laid material. But it wasn't just the land that seemed to benefit from the sudden influx of eggshells. Wildlife returned in droves, almost like they had been waiting. Seabirds circled above, diving low to peck at the enriched sand while small crabs scuttled along the newly fortified shoreline. The familiar sound of their busy movements replaced the silence that had marked the area for years. The beach had become lively again as animals of all sizes returned to claim territory, reassured by the new foundation beneath their feet. The first signs of success were undeniable. The project was immediately hailed as a triumph, a brilliant solution that could be replicated across other coastal regions facing similar erosion problems. The beach had transformed from a site of environmental devastation to a symbol of hope and recovery. The local community took pride in what had been accomplished. However, Years after the crushed eggshells were dumped onto the shoreline, the project's initial triumph faded into memory, replaced by unsettling signs of change. One of the first signs that something was amiss was the texture of the sand. The once soft, powdery sand had begun to feel unusually harder and more compact where the crushed eggshells had been spread. At first, it was only in a few isolated spots, but soon the effect began to spread. Visitors walking along the shoreline noticed that the sand felt almost like walking on concrete, stiff and unyielding underfoot in certain areas. The excitement over a firmer beach began to fade as people realized that the change wasn't just about stability but an unnatural compaction of the earth itself. For the locals, this posed a problem. Swimmers who used to love wading into the warm, shallow waters along the beach's edge began to find it increasingly difficult to navigate the shoreline. What had once been a gentle slope leading into the ocean was now a jagged, uneven incline. The water's edge seemed to have moved back, and the smooth gradient that had once made the beach a favorite for families and beachgoers was replaced by rougher terrain. Some tourists even described it as climbing into the ocean rather than wading into it. But the most troubling change was the sudden and alarming decline in local marine life. Species that had once thrived in the shallow waters close to shore, species that had been a source of food and sustenance for the local community, were beginning to disappear. Fish that had been abundant in the area were now scarce, and many fishermen returned empty-handed after hours on the water. Some local marine biologists theorized that the chemical composition of the water had shifted. The calcium carbonate in the eggshells intended to strengthen the beach's structure had begun to seep into the water, causing a gradual acidification of the ocean's ecosystem. Marine plants that had once flourished near the shore began to wither and die. The delicate balance that had once sustained the marine life in the region was now in jeopardy. As the calcium carbonate began to react with the salt water, it created imbalances that affected not just the physical structure of the beach, but the entire marine food chain. News of this soon spread, and the once promising project became darker. Once thrilled by the beach's transformation, locals voiced their discontent. The sand, compacted into an unnatural consistency, made walking uncomfortable. Some parts of the shoreline had started to erode unnaturally, creating deep, uneven ruts that left jagged, exposed patches of rock and earth. These sudden, unexpected changes made the beach less of a haven and more of a reminder that nature didn't always follow human plans. There were also reports of strange, unnatural growths along the shoreline. Some residents claimed to have seen odd formations of plants, unusual fungi, and other growths along the newly enriched beach. These were not the usual coastal plants. They looked distorted and unfamiliar, possibly a sign that the delicate ecosystem had been disturbed in ways that couldn't be immediately understood. In some areas, the sand even seemed to have a sticky residue, which wasn't there before, making it difficult for even small animals to move freely. The beach, once a haven for wildlife, now felt alien to the creatures who had called it home. Tourists who had flocked to the area for years began to stay away. The town, which had once flourished as a coastal hotspot, now saw a sharp decline in tourism. What had been a beautiful and pristine destination was now marred by unnatural formations and eroded sections of shoreline. Many visitors who had come to enjoy the sand and surf were alarmed by the new, rugged terrain and the strange, artificial reefs littering the beach. The allure of the beach as a vacation destination began to fade, and tourists sought out other, more pristine shores. Seeing all these, local authorities and environmentalists immediately initiated a cleanup effort, hoping to undo the damage that had been done. The cleanup effort quickly became a massive undertaking as crews realized the extent of the damage caused by the fused eggshell formations. Workers brought in heavy industrial machinery, expecting to dismantle the hardened calcium carbonate deposits without much trouble. But what was considered a simple task turned out to be nearly impossible. The calcium had bonded with the sand, forming a solid, concrete-like material that extended deep into the ground. Initially formed from the eggshell project, these structures were now acting like artificial reefs, but were unlike any natural formation. The crews struggled to break them apart, facing resistance from the most powerful equipment. The complications didn't stop there. As the cleanup continued, scientists from various environmental organizations arrived to assess the broader impact on the ecosystem. Marine biologists observed that the rigid structures had disrupted the natural flow of ocean currents, affecting marine habitats along the coast. Fish populations that once thrived in the gentle ebb and flow of the tides now struggled to adapt to the stagnant waters created by the reef-like barriers. Surprisingly, some species had begun to adjust, displaying unique behaviors to navigate the altered environment. Certain fish were seen using the artificial formations for shelter, and crabs had started burrowing into the hard patches, treating them like rock crevices. These unexpected adaptations complicated the removal process, as disturbing the new habitats could cause additional harm. After months of effort and significant investment, some progress was visible. Sections of the beach were cleared, and the water quality showed signs of improvement. Marine life slowly returned to areas where the calcium structures had been removed, signaling the beginning of ecological recovery. However, more than half of the hardened deposits remained, many buried beneath layers of sand or encrusted with marine life, making them difficult to access. Cleanup teams faced a dilemma. They needed to remove the formations to restore the beach and avoid causing further disruption to the species that had adapted to the new environment. After 2 years, a turning point came when environmental advocates and tech companies joined the effort. They brought cutting-edge equipment, including autonomous underwater vehicles, AUVs, designed for precise removal of underwater debris. These robots, controlled by a team of marine specialists, could carefully extract sections of the hardened calcium without disturbing surrounding marine life. This new technology accelerated the cleanup process, allowing teams to effectively target the most problematic areas. Despite these advances, the beach was not fully restored. Large portions remained scarred, with deep ruts and compacted patches of sand still evident. The effort had shifted from full restoration to a focus on minimizing long-term damage. In the end, the beach became a cautionary tale. The ships had unloaded millions of eggshells, hoping to save the beach from erosion. Instead, they had created a situation far worse than the one they had sought to fix. What seemed like a brilliant solution had become a nightmare that no one could have anticipated. What do you think about the eggshell project? Do you think it was doomed from the start? Or could it have worked with better planning? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more intriguing stories.